Today we have a Toro lawnmower. It's a 6.5 horsepower Tecumseh engine. Very common Tecumseh engine design. Toro made a million of these, and you may have one. So I'm doing a tune-up on this, and one of my steps to doing a tune-up is to clean out the fuel system in the carburetor. I've already removed the float bowl on the carburetor and drained the gas tank. And I'll show you what I found. So it's just a 1/2 inch socket to take off the float bowl, and then you have this little brass component here, which is your main jet, and then you have your float bowl. You can see the float bowl is fairly clean. This lawnmower actually ran pretty good, but when I took the float bowl off, there was some stuff in there, so I'm going to clean that out. But more importantly, what I noticed was that on the main jet here, I don't know if you can see that, but inside, that's part of a O-ring that must be damaged up inside the carburetor, because it's starting to deteriorate, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is show you how to rebuild this carburetor. Luckily, we don't have to do too much cleaning on it, but we will replace all the rubber components and O-rings and the float valve and that sort of thing, so get prepared. And so once again, the fuel system is clean. That's a very important step whenever you're rebuilding a carburetor, is to make sure you have a clean gas tank. So to remove the air filter, it just twists and pulls off, and we'll be replacing this air filter also. As you can see, it's in pretty rough shape. I'm going to take this engine cover off just so I can get a better look at things. It's a 4 1/4-inch bolts. You also have to remove the oil dipstick to get this red cover off. And this gas tank, at this point, you just rock it back and it slides out of place there. And now we're going to remove the muffler. Those are 7/16 inch bolts. Okay, now we can get to the bolts to take off the carburetor. So what I usually use to remove this is a 3/8 socket with an extension and a 7/16 inch wrench. Wrench goes there. Easy enough, eh? This back bolt can be kind of difficult to get to sometimes. I've had to dent this cover in before, push it in a bit just so I can get back to it. Let's see if I can reach it here. I'm just going to slide this, going to move this out of the way and try and get my wrench down onto that nut. Yep, I got it. And you can reach there. 2 bolts, and this carburetor is off of there. To get it off this linkage, you have to rotate the carburetor. Sometimes it can be difficult to rotate the carburetor if you still have the fuel line attached, so I'm going to take that fuel line off of there. This is just a breather hose, so you can just pull that off of there. Ooh, I almost damaged that gasket. Be careful not to damage that gasket. Alright, so I have the clamp off, and wiggle the fuel line, pull it off. Now I can rotate the carburetor like this, and it comes right off. And I always mark on here which hole it came out of. You see back here you have a little bracket and spring mechanism. Make sure you don't displace that. that is how we'll adjust our final RPM. Well, you can see I dropped the carburetor in the dirt, so it's a little dirty now, but overall I don't see any rust in there. It looks like this O-ring will need to be replaced. I might be able to clean that off and reuse it if it's in good shape. But up in there is where that deteriorating O-ring is, and there's actually 2 O-rings up in there that you need to replace. We will want to clean up all this crusty stuff around the edge. And the rest of the carburetor for that matter, just to make sure things are clean before we go back together. I think that gasket is still good. I just need to be careful with it. It's not broken, so we can reuse that. I'm going to reuse this one, but if you want to replace yours, go ahead. Well, folks, I got to go get some parts. I won't be long. All right, we're going to move things from there to here, and I'll show you how to do this. And this is the carburetor kit you need. You can see it comes with the a new needle, float bowl gasket, and a seat, and a gasket for the main jet. And the part number from Tecumseh is 631021B. And this is also a special tool you can get from Tecumseh. You don't need to use this to take out the seat, but it sure comes in handy. Hopefully you can see on this end there's a little hook, and on this end is where you put the seat for installation and you press it into place. One of the first things we need to do is take out the nozzle, the red plastic piece in there which has the O-rings on it. And to do that I just go in, open that throttle plate, and go into the carburetor with a long screwdriver and push down on it. Hopefully you can see it in there. See the red piece? That's what you want to push down on, and it comes out through there. Yeah, it's starting to come out. And if you have a pick or something, you can get down in there and pull it out. Sometimes it can be a real bugger to get out of there. I can usually get it out with one of these doodads, one way or another. Oh, there it is. So this is how it usually happens. You see, that's the O-ring that was falling apart that the main jet showed, but you also have an O-ring that goes up on here, and it usually gets stuck, and it did this time. You can't really see it, but it's stuck way up in there. So I use my pick to get in there, and you don't want to scratch things up too bad. Sometimes they can really be deteriorated up in there. I think I see it coming out. Yeah, okay, see that? Oops. So there's the other O-ring. They're both the same size. The part number for the small O-rings is 632547. There are holes in this little nozzle. You want to make sure it's not plugged up. And the new O-rings go in place. Just like that. And like that. Alright, then we'll take the float off. You just pull out the pin, and the float comes right out. Of course, I want to make sure to clean all that dirt off that I got on there. And the float needle just slips right off. So I'm looking at this carburetor, and it's actually in pretty good shape. You want to make sure that you clean things out very well on this carburetor. I got some dirt on it, but I'll clean all that up. Luckily, we don't have any rust in here. You can see the primer bulb is still in good shape. It's still soft and squishy. We do have a component down in that dirt we need to get to. On most of these carburetors, that's where your slow jet is, so you got to clear that dirt away. And you have a little black cap, plastic cap, see that? And I usually just poke a hole in it like so with a pick and pull that off. And now you can see you can remove the slow jet with a flathead screwdriver. Be careful not to get any of that dirt down in that hole. It's probably a good idea to clean that dirt off first. Okay, so here we are. Here we are. Here's your slow jet. As you can see, you have holes that go through it there, and you also have a very tiny hole through there. So you need to make sure that you poke something down in there. I usually use a piece of wire to clear that hole out, and these side holes to make sure that this jet is not plugged up. Very important. And I can see it going through there. And I'll want to clear out this hole as well. Okay, nice and clean. We're ready to go back in. But we also want to make sure that our hole there is not dirty. And if you look down inside there, I don't know if you can see it, there's also a tiny hole that you need to make sure is clear. And you can use carburetor cleaner or air down in there to clear out those passageways. That helps. And with this screwdriver I can scrape off a lot of this crud that's on here. A lot of times you have remnants of the O-ring down in there, and you need to use a Q-tip to clean it out. But I can tell it's clean down in there. So a little bit of carburetor cleaner is probably all I need. Now here's where we use this tool. We go down in here and we just poke. See the little hole? A little white rubber seat down in there. We poke this tool down in and we hook that seat and we pull it out. And we clean out that area as well. Make sure that's good and clean with the Q-tip. There's also a hole down in there that it would be a good idea to clean out as well with some carburetor cleaner. Things are starting to look really clean and ready to go back together. So I'm going to carefully put this piece in and make sure not to knock any dirt back in the hole. And you don't want to over tighten this, but you want to make it snug. These jets do break easily. So good and snug. Put the little cap back on. Okay, now to put the nozzle down in place, I like to spray a little bit of WD-40 here down in the hole, and it goes in this way. Just push it down into place. Be careful, sometimes that O-ring can pop off of there when you're pushing it down into place. There you go. We're all good. Now I need to clean out this jet. Oh, yeah, see that? That came out of there. That was a piece of that O-ring. So you want to make sure that that hole down in there is clear, as well as these two holes on the side, one on each side. I'll also spray a little bit of WD-40 down in where the seat goes. I don't know if you can see, but on one side of the seat there's grooves, and on the other side it's flat. So you want to make sure to put it groove side towards the metal. So this is how we'll install it. Okay, see that? Groove side towards the metal. So we basically just stick it in place and press it in. We don't have to go real hard, but we want to make sure it's good and seated. There we go. Okay, and we'll put the gasket back on. Now that I've cleaned off the carburetor. Okay, now when you put the float on, you have to adjust it. So you have to put the clip on your new float valve or float needle. And I've cleaned off my float. And I don't think it really matters which way you put the clip, as long as it stays on there the way it's supposed to be on there. Which is like this, if you could see. And you simply got a hair on there I gotta get out. Okay, then you put it in place. Oops. Sometimes it can be, takes a couple times to do it. Put your pin in. Alright, now you double check to make sure that the float is, or you want to double check to make sure the needle valve is still in place the way it's supposed to be, and this one is. Now you can see this float needs an adjustment. What you want to do is hold your carburetor upside down like this, and you can see how it's a different gap on that side versus that side. You need to bend the little tab on the bottom of the float over here. We want that gap to be even. So see the gap over here? It's less than it is over here. We want that gap to be even. So we get a long screwdriver, stick it in here, bend that tab down a little bit. Now the float is adjusted perfectly because we have an even gap on each side. Want to make sure the clip is still in place, which it is. And that's how you adjust the float, just like that. The float bowl goes on a certain way. See that line in the flat spot? That goes even with the hinge pin. So you want to install it right about like that. You see what I mean? That flat spot needs to be where the hinge pin is. Just like that. Our main jet is good and clean. Got a gaskets on there, still good, so we're going to use that. Okay, you want it, you don't want to over tighten it, but you do want to make it good and snug so all the gasket surfaces seal. Right about like that. This carburetor is ready to go back on the lawnmower. Alright, so hopefully you remembered which hole you took the linkage out of. I did, because I marked it. Turn the carburetor like this, put it in place. Don't forget the gasket. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just get this nut started first, have the carburetor tilted that way because it's easier to get to. So get that nut started first. Make sure the gasket's in place. Put the breather tube back on. Be careful not to knock any dirt into the carburetor inlet. You want to tighten these down good and tight. And I mentioned this little bracket and spring right here. You want to make sure when you tighten things back up that it is pointing straight up. There you go, like that. Okay, and we can put this muffler back on. You want to be really careful when you tighten these up, because it's really easy to break off this little tip, so you don't want to over tighten the muffler bolts. And I just kind of wiggle it around while I'm tightening them up to make sure it's good and centered. Remember, not too tight. If you break these off, you're going to be hating life. Ah, there you go. Ah, good and tight, but not broken. Okay, so now the gas tank goes back on. I replaced the fuel line because the old one was cracked. Alright, let me just slide it back into place, and we're good. New air filter, part number 36905. Goes in this way. Slides on and rotates into place. Not too tight, can break the plastic. Okay, hopefully she holds gas and doesn't leak out the carburetor. Okay, we're going to fire this thing up and adjust that carburetor like I was saying. Prime it a few times. Have to give the gas a little bit of time to get into the carburetor. So it runs pretty good, but I want to rev it up more, so I'm going to show you all how to do that. Okay, so by bending that bracket there, that way, it actually tightens that spring and causes the engine to rev up more. If the engine's revving up too much, you will bend that bracket back the other way. I'm just going to nudge it to tighten that spring. Alright, you can see I bent that tab. Now let's fire this thing up and see how much it revs up. It should rev up quite a bit more. I think that's a success. Thanks for watching, folks.